Okay, so stuck in the I'm not gonna say Mugen rut. It's not a Mugen rut, but after being just like inundated with like Mugen and some Kusoge and some wild ridiculous games through SockCon over the last couple weeks, I wanted to go back to my roots, my eSports roots, if you will. Maybe y'all know about a classic game.
Are you ready? Meet Mr. Frosty. Snowman with an attitude, clay fighter for life. Fists and feet fly as bad Mr. Frosty and his clay fighter friends smack it out in hilarious head-to-head combat.
Ultra Clay Fighter Tournament Edition. Not beta 1.4 anymore, we're version 2.0, folks. Zool has been running the development game behind Ultra Clay Fighter Tournament Edition. That's the thing, man. Like I was a Nintendo kid for sure. I was there for it. Clay Fighters is actually really interesting to me because it was the first game that I grinded out. It was the first game that I grinded out for a competitive event. I got something to show you here, folks. Way back in the day, a 10-year-old Mr. MKL managed to become the Blockbuster World Game Championship store winner. That's right. In the Super Nintendo format, my friends. This is my, original claim to esports fame. It was, now, first of all, so I don't know how old y'all are, but, there used to be these stores, brick and mortar stores that would you could pay them money and they would temporarily loan you video games. And this was one of the only ways you could realistically play a lot of video games. So I spent a ridiculous amount of time just being like, I'm gonna go to Blockbuster and I'm gonna scour the shelves to find out what is available, right? Is there anything new and interesting and cool? But man, Blockbusters, dude, they had stations. You would go into the store and they would just have display stations where you could play a bunch of games. It was a magical time. It really was. It was this era of video games where, you didn't have immediate access to everything. It wasn't just hey, it's launch day, I'm going to go to the PSN store and I'm going to download the game. No, it wasn't I'm going to get my pre-order from Amazon, man. It was games would show up at your stores in a 3 to 6 month window, right? Where it was it'll be fall, and fall could be August through December. Right? And you didn't know, and you had to go scour these stores, and things would pop up. You would have Blockbuster exclusive games, right? And that stuff is wild, and you don't really necessarily see it, right? Yeah, I don't think people can even really comprehend the way that it was if they weren't there. It's hard to really get a sense of how we consumed media and games in the 90s, even in the early 2000s compared to today. Ducky saying at their local Best Buy, they had a demo disc that had CVS2 on it, and by demo, it was the whole ass game, just all in Japanese. These things would happen, right? So like I said, this is legitimately, I got super hyped for this when this got announced, man. I realized that because I remember hearing, I don't recall them doing the first game championship at my stores here in Canada, up in Toronto. Maybe I was just too young for it and it didn't ping to me. But when I was 10 in 95, it pinged to me. And I was like, I gotta get in on this. I was a huge Donkey Kong Country fan. I was just really getting into Street Fighter with my cousins and my friends. So that was something that was I was like, I gotta do this. And my dad, bless his soul, was like, are you serious about this? Do you seriously want to get competitive? Because if you do, you need to practice and think about what you're doing and how you're playing and how to get better, right? Those are things you need to do if you want to get competitive. And so he brought me to the Blockbuster, and we found out what games are going on in this competition. And I feel so I can't believe this. I can only remember two. One of them was Clay Fighters. One of them was the Donkey Kong Country competition cart. And then the third one, I can't for the life of me remember. It might have been NBA Jam. It might have been Star Fox. I was racking my brain and I was searching the internet for what the hell were the games lists, right? And I can only find the Genesis ones for 95, but I was clearly the Super Nintendo format, the Super NES format. Judge Dredd, yes, Judge Dredd was one of the Genesis games. NBA Jam Tournament Edition was another one of the Genesis games, and I can't remember what the third Genesis was either, but there is a list out there. Vector Man? Yeah, I think Vector Man might have been the third there, Punk. But they like Acclaim. They were all Acclaim games because Acclaim made a custom competition Genesis cart for the Blockbuster World Championships 2. And so that's why there's some of those carts out there with all 3 games on them. The Super Nintendo format wasn't a single cart. It was different games because it was Clay Fighters, this other mystery game that I can't remember, and the Donkey Kong Country competition cart. And that competition cart was actually what was made for the 1994, I believe, Nintendo World Championships. So they made those for the Nintendo World Championships, and then when the Blockbuster thing came around the next year, they were like, okay, let's mass produce them and send them out to all these Blockbusters. So they already had the ROM and the ready, and they were just able to press it. They already had the carts from the 94 version from the Nintendo Championship. So they just like, okay, mass produce them, send them out to Blockbusters all over the place, and then they can run this. But the Super Nintendo one is a little bit more chunky because it's not the Acclaim custom cart. Yeah, that's right, Punk. And the games, the Donkey Kong competition cart was, I believe it was, I want to say 11 minutes or something like that, or maybe 7 minutes. It was an odd number in my mind. But they gave, a limited amount of time before the game. And all they did was because they had like a score counter on it. Whatever they were tallying was just displayed in the UI. And so the game would just freeze. It would soft lock. It would freeze up. And then you're like, well, I can't play anymore. And then the person who was like judging it would come down and record your score. Right? So like, This competition was amazing. So this was my first exposure to like competitive gaming in any real sense, right? Outside of like getting mad at my cousins in the basement. But so I remember, like I said, man, my dad was like, "You're gonna be serious about this. This is great." We went and found out. We got those games. I had Donkey Kong Country. They were like, "Okay, you're gonna run through the first like we didn't know what the challenge was. It was like collect a certain number of bananas in a limited amount of time, right?" But we didn't necessarily know that. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to try to get badass at Donkey Kong Country. I'm going to be able to get all the collectibles. I'll know where all the secrets are. I can get through it fast. I can get high score, right? Like, what are the different ways that I might be tested, like, on all my skills? So it's like, how did I play games? I did score attacks. I did time trials. So I'm like, okay, let's practice those. And then Clay Fighters, where I was just getting into Street Fighter at the time. And then I'm like, Clay Fighters? I don't know what the hell this is, but they want me to play it? Sure, great. So I picked it up, and I picked up Blob, and I tried Bad Mr. Frosty, and I tried Taffy. I couldn't get down with Taffy. Frosty, I could destroy my sister with him, but Blob was where I was like, okay, I'm able to like tear through the arcade mode kind of thing. And so I did the same thing. You go for points, you go for score, you go for not getting hit, you go for all these different ways to challenge yourself in these games. So it was just, it was a fantastic ride. So like when I heard about Ultra Clay Fighter Tournament Edition, and it just brought me back. So I'm gonna check this out. Man, I gotta say, one of my like white whales of video game collecting. I try not to get too obsessive with video game collecting. I try to just like collect the stuff that really is like sentimental to me. And that Donkey Kong competition cart, that's my white whale, man. Like I want a copy of that competition card. I don't need the NES World Championship cards. I don't need those things. I want that Donkey Kong competition. I want a limited demo, restricted version of a ROM that freezes up on you after a set amount of time because it matters to me personally and I have a connection to it. Right? There you go, Punk. Yeah, these competitions were your first exposure to competitive gaming. I think they were a lot of people's first exposure to competitive gaming, where you're like, I didn't realize you could like orchestrate a rule set and bring people to a singular location, all to play games and pit each other. Like that really didn't like occur to me in a structured fashion, especially at the age of 9 or 10 or whatever, right? But when you saw it, I was like, this is all the things that I love to do with these games. And someone saying all these other people love it too, and we can all get together and share that, and that was amazing. But like, man, my dad at the age of 10 being like, him sitting me down being like, we got to rent these games. You're gonna like study them and get better at them and figure out a training regimen and figure out your weaknesses and your strengths and where you need to improve. Like, that's wild. Like, that super informed my love of competitive gaming and like my attitude towards learning and engaging with these things, right? Where it's fun to learn and explore and refine and get better and then test your skills against other people, and win or lose, you get a reward for that because you were able to get that experience. And that was always it, right? Like, super sick. Awful rental company for movies. Yeah, Blockbuster, super iconic. You're right. It was... It was not the best, but it's what we had, and it gave you exposure. It was your saving grace in the 90s for kids who wanted video games. Yeah, Punk lived at a Blockbuster and discovered the Saturn there. Yeah, right? It was amazing. Like I said, being able to go in and having those kiosks set up where you could just try games for a certain amount of time and be like, dude, is this like it was like demos in the Xbox, like downloadable demos in the Xbox 360 era where you're able to experience a bit of a game beforehand. It was like being able to go out to the arcade and pump in a quarter and not have to spend $60. It was a way to try these games and figure them out, and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally do, because I'm not dropping $60 on Crash Test Dummies, but maybe I'd really like Crash Test Dummies for the NES. I don't know. I also never rented it because I'm like, why am I crashing Test Dummies? I don't know. Well, what were the rental costs? Were they affordable? Okay, so in like $1995, like it was like $3.99, $4.99 Canadian to rent movies or games, depending on how old they were. So it was like, I think it was like $4.99 for a 3-day rental for new releases, and you can get them cheaper for 7 days for older releases. So if you wanted to wait like like 6 months, you could get it for a couple bucks cheaper and then binge it a bunch on the weekend or over a week. It was interesting. Like, so they were relatively affordable. And that was actually, so for me, the coolest thing about the Blockbuster World Championships, like I said, man, I was the store champion. I'm feeling myself. I'm sorry. Not enough people get to appreciate the championship number 2, but yo, as store champion, I didn't have a high enough score in my region. I remember asking the guy, I think he might have lied to me, I was 10, but he said I was mere points away from qualifying for like the national competition. But I became store champion. In my region, I was my store champion at least. And this got you like it was like a gold Blockbuster card that gave you a bunch of free rentals over the course of a year. So it basically gave you like 50 free rentals or something like that over the course of a year, and then a bunch of like deal coupons that you could spend. And that was it, man. Being like, after like I win that, and then I'm like, now I can try anything I want. I'll be like, this game, I didn't want to rent this game before. Hey, it's an RPG. I can rent it 3 times in a row for free and beat the whole thing, right? Like, that was like the best thing. It was like, man, I got a payout for my first competitive gaming experience, man. eSports all the way. Yeah, fondly remember those coupons, Toby. It is a blast from the past. It absolutely is. Yeah, and then that's right, because you could. They're saying you could rent like Virtual Boys and consoles, but you have to leave a huge deposit. But they'd come in these big, like bulky-ass plastic cases with like soundproof foaming on the inside to protect them. And then you'd get the Virtual Boy, and the like stand would be completely destroyed. Be some kid mangled it 3 weeks before. Oh yes, please, you do have to take a pic of that case from me, Punk. I want to bring it back. Toby renting the Saturn and the N64 as well. Like, that was it, man. Like, I rented an N64 before I could afford one, and I'd go over to my friends, sleep over for the weekend, and we'd play N64, Mario 64, and Pilot Wings, which was basically all that was available for like the weekend, right? That's how it would work. Same thing. My only experience ever with a Virtual Boy was I rented it once from a Blockbuster, played Teleroboxer a whole heck ton, and for an extended period of time. And honestly, I don't want to play into the Virtual Boy burns your retinas, but honestly, don't do extended playtimes. It's not cool. I love it. That takes me back. It takes me back. And so that was what? It was 1995 was my first competitive gaming win. And then the next meaningful competitive gaming win I had was in 2020. So 25 years later, I managed to take top 8 at Frosty Faustings for Fantasy Strike. Sometimes you have gaps in your career, folks. That's longer than most marriages. My dry spell in esports is longer than most marriages. Oh dear lord. Yes, Psycho Blue. Shoutouts to the Blockbuster World Championships. It was so good. And so, like I said, when I saw the Ultra Clay Fighter stuff come up, it just like all these memories came flooding back. So I guess we're gonna play a bit of Ultra Clay Fighters Tournament Edition. I speak of the old contest, the old ways.